When the news first broke, people couldn't wrap their heads around it. How does an accidental drowning even happen? The comparisons came quickly, with many pointing out how Matthew Perry and Whitney Houston were both listed with the very same cause of death. That's when comedian Eddie Griffin decided he wasn't going to stay silent. He's now speaking out, making it clear that Malcolm-Jamal Warner's passing doesn't add up, and he's bringing receipts. According to Eddie, Malcolm confided some disturbing truths back when they worked together on Malcolm and Eddie. He claims Bill Cosby not only crossed serious boundaries with Malcolm but even tried to sabotage his career when Malcolm refused to play along with Hollywood's darker games. Fans had already been suspicious about the inconsistencies in Malcolm's death report, but no one expected Eddie, especially given his rocky history with Malcolm, to come forward and air it all out. As most of you already know, Malcolm was found dead just weeks ago, with reports saying he had been swimming with his 8-year-old. Malcolm was reportedly vacationing in Costa Rica with his family when tragedy struck. While swimming with his 8-year-old daughter, he drowned. Witnesses say a surfer rushed in, using his board to bring Malcolm's daughter safely to shore. A volunteer lifeguard managed to pull Malcolm and another surfer from the water, and for 45 minutes, emergency crews fought to revive him. But ultimately, he was pronounced dead. Still, the public wasn't buying the accidental drowning story. And then came the chilling part. Before Malcolm's death even happened, a spiritual reader on Instagram had already posted a prophecy claiming a big-name celebrity would go on vacation and never return. People mocked her, even reported her account for spreading conspiracies. But the moment Malcolm's death was announced, that same video resurfaced, and suddenly, it didn't seem so far-fetched. And this is where things take an even darker turn. Whispers in the industry suggest Malcolm's death may tie back to his days on The Cosby Show. Remember, he joined the cast when he was just 14 years old. Malcolm was just 14 when he joined The Cosby Show, and he stayed on until he was 21. Now, as we all know, years later Bill Cosby was exposed for his long history of predatory behavior toward young women and even cast members. Officially, Malcolm was never listed among Cosby's victims. But considering he practically grew up on that set, speculation has only grown louder that he may have endured the same abuse. Rumors claim Malcolm experienced his own share of trauma during those years, and that he was even preparing to go public with what really happened. In fact, shortly before his trip to Costa Rica, Malcolm sat down for an interview and revealed that Hollywood had offered him multiple TV and film roles, but every one of them came with a disturbing catch. He said he would have had to sell his soul by doing things that went completely against his integrity. And because he refused, he turned down millions of dollars. Malcolm explained that, thanks to his mother and his close team, he had always been careful about choosing the right roles, and that he valued longevity over quick fame. But to many, that statement sounded like a warning, a sign that he was pushing back against Hollywood's darker demands. In that same interview, Malcolm went even deeper, crediting his mother for teaching him the importance of versatility and longevity in Hollywood. She told him that every actor goes through seasons, times when they are hot, and times when they are not. And the real test is how you handle those lows. Do you stay true to yourself, or do you start taking desperate roles just to stay relevant? Malcolm admitted that he'd been blessed, financially stable enough to be selective. He said his body of work might not be perfect, but it would never embarrass him or misrepresent his people. Most importantly, he stressed that he never had to take a role that would compromise his soul. Now, fast forward just weeks later, and the headlines are calling his passing a tragic accident. According to TMZ, Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death was due to a strong ocean current while he was on vacation with his family. At first, the outlet reported it as nothing more than an unconfirmed accidental drowning. But for many people, especially after hearing Malcolm speak so firmly about protecting his integrity, that explanation feels far too convenient. Reliable sources were quick to report that Malcolm's death was nothing more than an accidental drowning. No drugs, no reckless behavior, no signs of foul play. Just a tragic rip current that pulled him away while he was swimming with his family. On paper, it sounds like one of the most heartbreaking ways to go. One minute you're laughing and making memories with your loved ones, and the next, you're gone. Nature at its most unforgiving. But right off the bat, the internet wasn't buying it. People were quick to point out how accidental drownings seemed to be a recurring theme in Hollywood, immediately drawing comparisons to Matthew Perry and Whitney Houston, who were both reported to have died under eerily similar circumstances. And while TMZ and other outlets framed it as simply a tragic accident, the public couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Even more chilling? Celebrities close to Malcolm didn't sound entirely convinced either. Many of them dropped cryptic reactions hinting at the possibility that he wasn't just taken by the ocean, but silenced. His former co-star Eddie Griffin, who worked with him on Malcolm and Eddie, flat out suggested that something darker was at play. And when TMZ caught up with Raven-Symoné, her reaction only fueled the speculation further. And Sis could not hold back her tears. Raven, who co-starred with Malcolm on The Cosby Show, had seen firsthand some of the struggles and alleged trauma he faced during those years. When TMZ asked how she was holding up, she broke down, admitting that the past few years had been filled with loss and that Malcolm's death was a lot to process. Her raw emotions struck a chord, especially with fans who grew up watching them together and felt like they'd lost a family member. But while Raven grieved openly, TMZ quietly slipped out something else, an exclusive clip of Malcolm arriving in Costa Rica. He looked happy, healthy, and full of life, clearly excited to spend time with his family and return home refreshed. Yet, according to many online, the industry had different plans. The tragic reality? Malcolm would never make that flight back. What? The actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has died, and first of all, rest in peace to him. By all accounts, he was a stand-up guy and a positive role model. But when you really start looking into this whole thing, the details get strange. He passed away at the age of 54. Now, 5 plus 4 equals 9. And if you've seen my videos on the number 9, you already know it represents completion. But here's the kicker. The show that made him famous, The Cosby Show, in gematria also equals 54. And if that's not wild enough, he died on July 20th, the 201st day of the year. Why does that matter? Because The Cosby Show ran for exactly 8 seasons, equaling 201. And if you know your history, the number 201 is tied to more than just TV. It's the same number linked to the infamous Event 201 simulation that went down in October of 2019, right before the world changed forever. Right before they rolled out CO. You'll remember? That's why I'm telling you, we need to keep an eye out for this number showing up again in future events. And speaking of 9 in 2011, here's where it gets even crazier. Ozzy Osbourne just passed too. He had just done his final concert a couple weeks ago, titled Back to the Beginning. Kinda odd, right? Almost like they already knew. And get this, the venue's attendance was 45,000. 4 plus 5 equals 9. Call it a coincidence if you want, but his full name in gematria also comes out to 2011. Now what are the chances? That's why I tell y'all, hop into my Break the Matrix community, because I've got a whole decode section just for this type of breakdown. But let me ask you, does this feel like random math? Or is there a bigger pattern? Now let's pivot to Eddie Griffin real quick, because the streets are buzzing. Word is, Eddie was just as shocked as the rest of us when he heard the news. But here's the messy part. Sources say he believes this whole thing runs way deeper than what's being reported. Eddie supposedly thinks Malcolm was flat out targeted. So why hasn't he hopped online to spill that tea? Well, apparently he feels like nobody would believe him. And even worse, speaking out could put his own life in danger. Now, before we get carried away, let's be clear. We can't confirm those insider claims 100%. But one thing is undeniable, Eddie's silence is loud. On social media, Eddie finally broke his silence with a heartfelt post that left fans stunned. He wrote, "My heart is heavy today. For what the world lost was a father, a son, a poet, a musician, an actor, a teacher, a writer, a director, a friend, a warrior that I had the pleasure of going to war with against the Hollywood machine. And sometimes with each other, because that's what brothers do. But the love was and is always there. You've taught me so much and I thank you. Rest well, my big little brother." Now here's why that message hit so hard. Back when Malcolm and Eddie were still running, the two didn't get along at all. Malcolm openly admitted their toxic behind-the-scenes relationship, and his constant clashes with the show's writers played a big role in the series ending at 88 episodes instead of the 100 needed for syndication. Malcolm was frustrated with the scripts, while Eddie's chronic lateness and wild-card behavior drove producers crazy. By Malcolm's own words, it was a miserable experience. And yet, despite all that tension, the two men managed to reconcile later in life, squashing their old feud. That's why Eddie's tribute now feels so much deeper. Insiders even claim that because they patched things up, Malcolm confided in Eddie about the darker truths he faced in Hollywood, especially surrounding Bill Cosby. If that's true, it could explain why Eddie's grief looks like more than just heartbreak. It looks like he's carrying a heavy secret. When you really stop and think about it, the entire situation surrounding Malcolm-Jamal Warner's passing becomes much heavier than it first appears. This wasn't just any actor. This was someone who grew up right in front of the cameras, someone who helped define a generation of television, and someone who, whether he wanted to or not, became permanently tied to one of the most complicated legacies in TV history, The Cosby Show. Now, while he was on that set, we know for a fact that Bill Cosby was allegedly preying on multiple women and using his power to manipulate and silence people. It's one of those dark open secrets that only came to light years later, but when you rewind the clock and place Malcolm back in that environment, it's impossible not to ask the question, was he also a victim of that toxic culture? Was he just another casualty of an industry that protects predators and chews up the people around them? A lot of fans online are asking the same thing. One comment that really stood out said, "Bill Cosby is alive and Malcolm-Jamal Warner is gone." That sentence alone makes me question the meaning of existence. And honestly, it hits hard. It makes you reflect on the unfairness of life, how someone who was reportedly a good man, a positive role model, and someone who managed to avoid the pitfalls of fame, ends up being taken away in such a tragic way, while someone with a history as dark and messy as Cosby's is still here. Another fan wrote, "It sucks that rewatching The Cosby Show is now so hard, because Bill's sins overshadow the legacy of someone as talented as Malcolm." And that's the sad truth. The Cosby Show was groundbreaking. It wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural shift. For the first time, millions of households saw an upper-middle-class black family portrayed on TV in a positive light. It broke stereotypes, it gave representation, and it changed how America viewed black families in entertainment. And Malcolm, as Theo Huxtable, was a huge part of that. He was the kid so many of us related to, the one who made mistakes, learned lessons, and had those heartfelt father-son talks that felt so real. But here's the tragic twist. Now, the entire show feels tainted because of Bill's actions. Instead of celebrating the talent and achievements of the other cast members, like Malcolm, Felicia Rashad, and Tempest Bledsoe, people can't separate it from the crimes. And in the end, it's the innocent ones, the people who poured their heart into their work, who end up having their legacies buried under the shadow of one man's sins. That's heartbreaking. And let's not forget, Malcolm didn't just stop after The Cosby Show. He went on to build a career as a respected actor, director, poet, and musician. He kept evolving, even when Hollywood tried to box him into one role. He showed resilience, creativity, and an ability to stay grounded in an industry that's known for destroying people. That's why this sudden death hits so much harder. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't out here chasing chaos. He was simply a man on vacation with his family, making memories. And then, in the blink of an eye, he's gone. Some people say, well, it was just a tragic accident, a rip current in the ocean, one of those freak natural disasters that nobody can predict. And yes, that explanation makes sense on the surface. But for others, it doesn't sit right. The timing, the numbers surrounding his death, the way celebrities are reacting, there's this lingering sense that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story than what we've been told. Eddie Griffin, his longtime friend and co-star, even hinted that Malcolm might have been targeted. Now, we don't know if that's true, and I'm not here to say it is. But when someone as close as Eddie raises those suspicions, it makes you think twice before just accepting the official narrative. At the same time, even if you strip away all the conspiracy talk, you're left with a reality that's just as painful. The younger generation will never fully experience the cultural magic of The Cosby Show. They won't get the chance to watch it without the baggage, without the dark cloud of Bill's sins. And that means Malcolm's legacy, and what he gave to the world, may never shine as brightly as it should. That's a tragedy in itself. So the question remains, what do we make of this? Do we chalk it up to a tragic accident, a cruel twist of fate that took someone too soon? Or do we look deeper and consider whether the toxic environment he came from, or even darker forces in Hollywood, had something to do with it? It's not an easy question, and honestly, maybe we'll never get a clear answer. But here's what I do know, Malcolm-Jamal Warner deserved better. He deserved a chance to keep living, to keep creating, to keep inspiring. He deserved to have his legacy remembered for the good he brought into the world, not overshadowed by the sins of someone else. And the least we can do is honor that, by keeping his memory alive and not letting his story fade away. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you really think about Malcolm's sudden death? Was it simply a tragic accident? Or do you think it connects to the darker history he was tied to during his time on The Cosby Show? Do you believe Eddie Griffin's suspicion that something more sinister may have happened? Or do you think people are just reaching because the truth is too painful to accept? Drop your thoughts down below, let's talk about it. And as always, don't forget to click right here to check out another messy video, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.